Everyone, welcome. We're going to just take a few more minutes just to let everybody join. Who's going to join? Hang tight. All right.
Yeah, I vote we go.
There we go. All
Let's do
right,
this.
great. Nice. Welcome, everyone. We have a nice small group today, which will be really great because we actually really want to have a chance to have a nice kind of amount of participation from everybody. We got some really good questions that came in that we wanted to go over. But of course, as we're going through these, feel free to raise your hand. We'd love to hear from you, more specific questions if we want us to dive deeper, if there's anything that needs more clarification. I'm really happy to do that. So if you don't know me, my name's Doug. I'm the customer success manager here at meez, and with me is Sarah, as always. Sarah?
Hi, I'm the Director of Customer Success and Support here at meez. Very excited to get into the Ask Meez Anything.
Great.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So this is kind of a grab bag episode, if you will. So we have a bunch of different questions that have come in, and we're picking and choosing kind of ones that we think might be really interesting and helpful for everybody. So we are going to start off. One of the questions that came in was, I would like to best use your app from the start. Do we start with batch recipes or what? So this is a great question because it does sometimes feel when you're coming to a new program like this that it's kind of hard to figure out where to start. So I'm going to share my screen. Good. So I have some recipes in here. If you came to some of the last webinars, you might recognize some of the work we've done so far. So it's good to kind of use the same sort of templates that we worked on. I would say that as you're building your recipe database, it is a really, really good idea to start with your batch recipes, because the batch recipes are going to kind of filter up from the bottom and compose your further batch recipes, if there are any, onto your final plates. Starting with the plates and working down, you're going to have to start creating recipes as you go. Sometimes there's confusion about what is a recipe and what is an ingredient as you're building them, and I think can create a little bit of confusion later on. So what I would always suggest is you start with the most basic prep recipes in your kitchen and go from there. The added benefit to that is you actually have prep recipes as you're building them that can be used by your prep team right away, which is really, really valuable, because this program is really designed for your culinary team. It's for your cooks, for the people in the kitchen who can take these recipes and start scaling with them right away, making their lives a little bit easier and getting those techniques down that you want them to learn. So just to kind of dig in a little deeper, if I'm looking at a French onion soup recipe, sorry, a plate, if you will, but it's in it is a recipe in meez, if you will. You'll notice that there is one of these items has a little down arrow, and that means it's a sub recipe. So for anyone who doesn't know, a sub recipe is just another kind of recipe in meez that you use in a parent recipe. If you click on that down arrow, you'll see this is the sub recipe right in there, and I can jump in to this prep method for this sub recipe right by clicking right here. The reason I like to, start off by creating this beef stock prep recipe, and I think naming it prep is really smart too, because then it's easy just to kind of find. Once I've created that, when I'm building my French onion soup recipe, I'm going to click edit here. And now that I'm in the edit zone, I can just selecting beef stock prep. I wanted to bring you to this stage here because what it shows you is the beef stock prep, the prep recipe that I already created, is going to be right here in the dropdown for you to select from. And it's just a kind of more convenient, in my opinion, way of building your parent recipes and your final builds, just to be able to see those prep recipes already there, signified by that little icon. If you can't see, it's kind of small, little blue, sort of purplish icon, versus beef stock, the meez ingredient right there, which you might be tempted to use when you're building a plate, but really it's not an ingredient, it's a recipe. So that's kind of why I like to start with the batch recipes. It kind of gives you that structure in your accounts to then start taking those sub recipes and adding them to your final plates.
Beautiful.
Any thoughts on that, Sarah?
I have some thoughts on how I would organize it.
Yeah.
Just in your, so this is perfect. Made two things. One, maybe you do buy beef stock, like prepped, and maybe you also have a sub recipe. So both may exist in your account. And maybe for French onion soup, you make it, from scratch. So that's where the sub recipe comes into play. And then maybe for your soup of the day, it's whatever. We use the stuff in the box. We're not going to tell anyone. For those moments, maybe you want to have that price as well. So both can exist in one account, is the one thought I had. And then as far as adding prep to the name, so this is just speaking as a chef, I would want, I don't want the word prep in the name, right? I want it to just say spicy mayo. So what I would do is I would add a tag. So this is a shout out to those of you who asked for like the hidden tricks and tips. And I didn't prep Doug for this ahead of time, but Doug, if you would click edit and then scroll down, there's this section called tools. And this is something that internally in meez, we use this for way more than tools. So it's really easy to just add the word prep to that tool name box and click add new tool. It says tool, I think of it as a tag, and then hit done. And then I can, when I go back to home, right, and I could maybe click the filter and say tools. And now everything that I've ever tagged with prep would show up in that list. So here we only have one, but it's a really like simple way of, once you start to get into the hundreds of recipes, it really becomes overwhelming. There are several different ways that you can organize in meez. Recipe books is one, tool tags is another. That's like a hidden internal feature. So they're extra.
And just to show so everyone knows where to find that one more time, when you are on a recipe, you have to be on the prep method tab. Okay. So it's the first tab you're usually on anyway. And just scroll down and there's an additional details, and that's where tools live.
Yes. Excellent.
Yeah. And again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand. Feel free to chat in the box and let us know.
Yep. Throw questions in the chat. We're here. And we count on me for bringing the extra. It's just my personality. So I can take the next one, Doug, if you're ready.
Yeah, go for it. Do you want me to point and click?
I'll share.
Okay.
Okay. So this next one, the question is, how can I create an order list from my scaled recipes? Can I add recipes to a menu and find our overall food cost? So the way that we handle this in meez now is to create what I like to call a super recipe. So we have an example here. So this has 25 burgers, this menu. It also has 25 tomato salads and 25 of the French onion soup that Doug started. And this recipe is for 25 people, so it's got a yield up here. So there's two ways to find the export for the order list for this. First, if I'm inside the super recipe that we've already built, I can go to these three dots here and then hit export. And then I can either export recipes into a Word document or create an order list here. And if once I click that, it will send an email with the order list to the owner. And I did just want to like piggyback off of what Doug was saying. Here you can see there's these down arrows. So even though these are plates in a super recipe, plate recipes end up being sub recipes. So all the words are kind of interchangeable. It just depends on the recipe that you're looking at now. These are all children to the parent of the super recipe. So the order list itself, because we've scaled this for 25 each, what we're going to see is all of the ingredients that we would need for this entire menu, all of the purchase quantities, and the purchase unit of measure. So this is how you would order these things, not necessarily what was listed in the recipe. What's listed in the recipe, you can see in columns D and E. That's basically your totals of what was listed in the recipe. But it also, if you have all of your recipes, all of your ingredients contain costs and purchase unit of measure, meez will calculate that. So I know I need 6¼ pounds of heirloom tomatoes in order to create this menu. You can see over here in the notes, amount not specified for recipe, or it is smaller than 0.01. So those things where it's like, maybe there's an as needed, or it's only one, less than 1 gram. That's where you're going to see that note pop up. Okay. So that is how you would export an order list, or at least one way. There is another way, and you can do it here from the recipes screen. So here I see the menu super recipe. If I go over to the 3 dots here, I can also do that same export right here without opening the recipe. Personally, I like to do it from here because then I can see what I scaled it for. So if I wanted to take this up to 30 or take the whole thing up to 30, I could do that. Okay.
Can I add one quick thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
In that export, if you have multiple ingredients, the same ingredient across multiple plates, like you have cucumber across different sub recipes, it's going to collapse that into one line for you. So it's going to add all of those totals together, just to clarify that. So you're not going to see cucumber on 5 different lines that you have to then sort and add them together. It's going to do all
That's a great point, Doug. It does aggregate the data as long as it is all the same ingredient. So if you have heirloom tomatoes and then also, beefsteak tomatoes, those are going to be 2 different things because you've told me is that you order 2 different types. But when it's cucumbers in several recipes, or let's say we use baguette in several recipes, this is the total for the entire recipe, the entire menu. All right.
Beautiful. All right. So I have a question here about importing and exporting. So you saw one example of how to export, not to be confused with the other way you can export in meez. So what Sarah just showed us is doing it on the kind of individual recipe level, right? Using this action over here, exporting, or doing it from the recipe page. We also have, you go to plus new at the very top right, we also have an export here. Now this might be changed based on your permissions. If you're an owner of the account, you'll definitely be able to see this. And when you click export, and also depending on if you're a premium user or a business user, you will see different ones here. So I'm actually on a business account right now, so I'm not seeing a nutritional analysis, which is one option we have here too. But right from here, you can export 2 different levels of kind of cost analysis, recipe costs and ingredient costs. Now recipe costs, as you can imagine, is going to be your list from your recipe table. So it'll give me all of these, and it will give me the costing information for those. The ingredient cost export will be from this table. So it'll give you your list of all of your ingredients, as well as the costing information from those ingredient pages. So if you're ever in need of just kind of a CSV, spreadsheet look of your account and kind of any missing data that might, be helpful to find, that's a really good idea, is to go to that plus new up at the top right and click export. We do have an import here as well. The import is just going to be for your costing information. That's how you import costs. It's via a spreadsheet or a CSV file. And when you hit next on this import, this is what we use to import. You would drag and drop your file here. We really, really recommend taking a look at this video on the right-hand side to kind of clarify any, the columns and make sure they're in the right, any of the names are correct. There is a way for you to map everything. It's pretty straightforward, but highly recommend using this information here just to double check it. And that costing information will end up landing on your new purchase item table, which will be right here. And we did a pretty big deep dive into costing on the previous webinars, so I don't want to go too much into that. But check out our webinar page, which we'll send you at the end of this for those topics as well. Yeah, anything?
I just put it in the chat for anybody who wants to have that saved, and we will include it in our follow-up email. Because you can watch any of our webinars back in case you missed them. They're all recorded. Yes, keep going.
And that's importing and exporting from this page here. If you're asking about importing recipes, it's still going to be going to this plus new and going to the recipe button right there. And this is where you're going to be able to create your recipe name and copy and paste your recipe one at a time from whatever file you're using already, or they're in Word docs, or you just want to free type it. That's the way you would do that.
So one thought I had, Doug, I think it's worth digging into. Will you go back to the import for costing? So plus
Yeah.
new and then import. So in this modal here, it gives you a tip on where to find your location ID. And this is like one of the most commonly asked questions.
Mhm.
So if you click on that concepts page, it will open up. We're in Doug's Dogs right now, and it'll show you that your location ID can be found right there. So if you're ever confused or you're looking at something in the template that says location ID and you're like, what does that mean? There's that link lives there in everybody's account. So you can always go to plus new, open up the module, and it'll show you how to find that location ID.
And that, by the way, this concepts page is always available on your admin panel. So that's top left here. That's where you're going to find your concepts page, as well as your manage team page, your profile. And within your profile, you can see your invoices from if you're doing a monthly or annual subscription, you can find your invoices there too. So really helpful information right in here.
Awesome. There was one piggyback on that question about importing ingredients, about maintaining their pricing. So there's a couple of different ways to do this. Best practices are, a weekly ingredient upload with all of updated pricing, but that is something that you would have to do, by hand or in Excel, or at minimum, it would have to be in Excel to get imported. We do have other options available. We have an invoice processing service that will automate, like you would take pictures of your invoices as they come in, send them in an email, and we would turn them into lines in an Excel sheet. Also, it would allow you several other features where you can track price history and just purchasing in general. But then that data would be a live feed that would open into your meez account. So you could then link live pricing to your meez ingredients. So again, that is invoice processing. If you are interested in learning more, please respond to our survey at the end or throw something in the chat. And you can always reach out to support@getmeez, and everybody over there, those guys are the wizards. They'll lead you to the right place.
Beautiful. All right. Shall we talk
ownership?
Ownership. Cool. So there was a question here about ownership, about team management, recipe books, cleaning up your team kind of page. This is a really great topic because meez was really developed to be able to be shared between cooks, between your team, between your colleagues. So team management is definitely integral to the app, and there's a lot of different ways you can do to do a lot of this stuff. So the first thing to talk about is the fact that every team, every business and premium user in meez is going to have what we call a concept as kind of your umbrella to your account. Mine is Doug's Dogs, right? Within that concept, I can start adding my recipes, but I can also add my team. So when I click on Manage Team here, and I click over here, Add Team Member, you'll notice that there's my concept with one of my locations. So I would put in my team member name, my email, their email address, and I would pick whether they have view access or edit access. Now, view access is basically I can see the recipe, I can scale the recipe, print the recipe, that's about it. Edit access, you can modify it, delete it, add new recipes. So there's a lot more privilege there to be able to create and build in the account. So as you're sending, you add somebody to this account, you would send them, the app would send them an email saying you've been added to this concept, click here to accept, they would accept it, they would put in a password for their own, login, and then they would see all of the recipes within that concept. So that's adding them to the kind of umbrella of the account. But some of you might have a really huge account with 800 recipes and you're kind of using them across multiple years. That can be a lot to add someone to and have them see all this content. So some people like to go from on the recipe book level. They like to share just a single recipe book with their team members, whether it's one of their prep cooks or one of their colleagues, whatever. And by doing that, all you have to do is click on the little checkbox on the left, right next to one of your recipe books. And you'll notice that right there is a grant view access. So again, this is actually only for viewers. If you want to be an editor on this account, you do have to be added to the concept. But for viewers, you can just click grant view access. And then they'll see only this recipe book and only the recipes within that book. So that's a nice way to kind of tighten their view, if you want them to really focus only on a select number of recipes for their station, great, you can do that. You can go even further and actually just share, oops, I guess I got logged out. You can actually just share an individual recipe by going to the recipe itself and clicking the share button up here and granting view access just to this individual recipe. Usually that's not how folks would do it with team members, who they're, in their restaurant, just because you have to do it one at a time. It's much easier to do it from the recipe book section. Going back to the, let's see if I might have to log back in. Oh boy. Are you logged in, Sarah?
I just stepped back out, but I can pop back in.
I think because both of us are in there.
Yes, I think I did it. I'm sorry.
No worries. Hold, please, while we fix this technical difficulty.
Okay, here we go.
Are you back?
I am. Where did you want to go? Back to recipe books?
Go to manage team, actually.
Manage team.
If you could actually, why don't you add me, Doug at Get Me's, so we can see how it looks. If you want to add me as an editor.
I don't know if I want to give you that kind of permission.
Fair enough. Fair enough, chef. Once you add me as a team member, you'll notice that now I have those 3 little dots. They're a little light gray there, but that's a really important feature as well. So I just got added. I just got an email saying log in. If Sarah, as my boss, wants to just get rid of me and say, nope, no more access for you, she can hit remove team member, or she can maybe click edit team member to downgrade me to viewer right from here as well. So either of those options are available, and have you just through those 3 dots.
It is important to say that you can't remove access here. Like, you have to delete them. So I can't just say, well, Doug has no access to these concepts. It won't let you, right? It grays this out. So that can be confusing. It does say, please delete this team member, but we all get a lot of red text every day. So I can understand skipping that. But so if you're trying to remove access, the best way to do that is to remove team member. You can always add them back. It's okay. Nothing's going to blow up. But yes.
Yeah, so that's kind of managing your team. Again, you can do it from the concept level to give them access to everything in the concept. You can do it from the recipe book level. Those are probably the 2 most commonly used ways of managing your team. And when you share view access with a recipe book, they will show up on this page too, so you can see who's been given access to what. All right.
I don't want to do it. Maybe it takes a minute.
Making a liar out of me. I think you might have to.
I didn't mean it. I'm sure it's true.
I don't think you have to accept it.
Oh, I have to accept it. Okay, that makes sense. Yes. Yeah. Okay. The next one is using meez as recipe training and plate spec tool. What is the best in class model? And I think everybody gets a copy of the pork rice bowl. Was one of our thoughts, is like kind of a best in class, just way to showcase everything that you could do, right? We have lots of different clients using this as recipe training or as in daily production. Best in class is really like, what does done look like for you? And every chef is different. Maybe you want to have pictures so that your cooks have a guide. Maybe it's a step-by-step with the prep slideshow where it's important to see each step along the way. And maybe it's really just well-written recipes that scale to the right thing. Maybe serving doesn't matter for you. Maybe it's we cook things in hotel pans or in deep third pans or whatever. What does that finished product look like? And we try to help you write the recipes in the way to both get you accurate costs, if that's a goal, but more importantly for production and plate training to get you that end goal that you're looking for in the way that you would cook it in the kitchen. So you can see here, there's lots of sub recipes for portioning the pork, and then just a step-by-step guide. And yeah, we definitely see this as a best in class.
And also using the header feature, I think, is really great. You'll notice
to break it up,
the bowl for the carrot to garnish. As soon as you start getting to that 8 to 10 maybe ingredient list, it starts to get a little more difficult to read and to keep track of. And so using the headers really makes your life easier and for your cooks' lives easier to be able to just like focus on one section at a time.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend using those headers. And then the
Yeah, it
notes.
looks like 3 different recipes, but it's all one to scale. It's one
Right.
recipe.
Exactly. The notes as well. We put in a note at the top there just to kind of give you an idea about what this is. It's a sample recipe, but a note can be anything. And you can put a nice big note there at the top that just calls attention to whoever's viewing this, wherever you want them to go. So whether it's kind of where this recipe came from, its origins, its importance to the restaurant, whatever it is, you can put anything you want there. And so it really
We've seen a lot of different things as far as serving utensils, or this should be served in this kind of glass, or this, whatever those tips are. Pairing notes also go well here for service staff.
Yep.
When they're, when you're training them to know how to talk about your plates or talk about the drinks, whichever. This is just a great resource within the recipe to be able to put that there.
Yeah, and we had one question about how you can print cost cards and recipe cards, and we don't have a recipe card template or a cost card template necessarily, but this is really where you would want to kind of put your recipe card information, I think, in a way that makes sense to your team, whether it's for a front of house, maybe for a final plate, or back of house for prep recipes. But right from there, Sarah just showed you from the 3 dots in the middle there, you can print right from here, print it to a PDF, and there you go. If you want to get really into it, if you want to go to the docs real quick, Sarah.
Yeah.
We do have customers who have been using docs for this reason, to create cards, templates, things like that, because this gives you a little bit more flexibility. And I think docs are a great tool for anything related to non-recipe content in your kitchen. So think about things that are hanging on clipboards all over your kitchen, right? They could have a place in Meez right here. You can put all this information there, and that way it's easily searchable. So it's whether it's recipe cards or who to call when the hood's broken, or
slicing guides,
manuals.
like cheese should be on 1.5 and prosciutto is on 0.2, whatever it is.
Yeah, anything like that, training materials, stuff like that. It's great for docs. So highly recommend checking out using docs for those kinds of reasons.
Excellent.
All right, cool.
Questions? There we go.
Pretty close to that one. 3, or close to the hour. Does anybody have any questions they wanted to throw our way while still have a couple of minutes left?
I can go with a quick question.
Sure.
Yeah, so we have like Mel's, which is like a casual, more fast-paced restaurant, and then which I've been able to build out meals for quite easily. And then we also have a 2 Michelin Italian restaurant as well that's part of the space. And with that one, I'm having a little bit of a harder time to kind of build in the recipes for meals for. If you have any like tips on that.
What can you give us an example of one of the struggles?
I would say kind of like they're using like certain, how would I put it? Like using like they cool off like braising liquid, and then they get it reduced again, and then it's reduced for another separate recipe, and then again. Is there a way that I can make something like that more easily, like so I can build that out on Meez as well?
Yes, so definitely you can. It's
Okay.
going to look like building different sub recipes.
Okay.
I'd be happy to get into that one-on-one with you if you'd like to. Also, I'm thinking also some of the prep action things that we talked about in the last 2 webinars might be really helpful, given that you're fine dining and you're probably doing a lot more prep to each of your ingredients before they actually end up in a recipe. That is probably another piece that's going to really help with that. So I would recommend looking at the other 2 webinars, specifically the last one we did, which was the part 2 that gets in depth on prep actions. But as far as like, I took this stock, I reduced it down to a demi, whatever, and then I picked it back up over here. That's just building in a series of sub recipes, because maybe you're using it at different points.
Right. Yeah.
yeah, happy to set up some time just to give you a quick walkthrough, and maybe we'll record that and
Okay.
share.
Okay.
Awesome. I'm going to steal your information so I can contact you after the fact.
Yeah,
Uh,
go ahead.
Perfect. Anybody else? Questions? All right.
Yeah. Well, reach out if you need anything. Of course, we are always here to help. We want this to, be kind of used to you and your specifics. So reach out again if you have any other questions, and we'll continue doing these webinars as often as we can.
And as always, you can always reach out to support@GetMeez or at the chat box in the app. Those guys are wizards. They'll show you best in class practices for any and all of your questions. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.